is the idea of prediction markets turning towards what would appear to be otherwise casino type games, predict the next spin of a hypothetical roulette wheel, things along those lines. Do you see that happening as a, skirting the casino laws and stuff?
I think you're going to see a lot of companies test the boundaries of what is a prediction market.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
All right, welcome back to another edition of the Business of Betting podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Edelstein, senior analyst at ingame.com. I'm joined today by Adam Kaplan of Astralis Capital Management. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you've been involved in the industry, it seems like, for a pretty long time. Just the pace of change in the last year even, how does it compare to, looking back from when you got into the industry originally?
I think it's just a different evolution. It's an accelerated rate of change in that there are so many new types of gaming emerging that have emerged. But that really has been kind of the tale since the PASPA repeal in 2018 and rollout of sports betting and iGaming nationwide.
So, you spent a good chunk of your career at FanDuel, and let's start with some of the more recent stuff here. FanDuel, big in the news along with DraftKings, deciding to, leave, I guess mutually agreed to leave the American Gaming Association. Obviously, it has to do with prediction markets. What's your take on that? What do you see coming from that? And are you at all surprised by it?
I think it's a big shift in strategy and in terms of the alliance. And I do think there's some symbolism to that tie-up and the sort of concentrated effort to advance legal gaming in the US. Clearly a difference of opinion between the folks on different sides about how to handle prediction markets. And, who knows, maybe some of the other types of gaming that have popped up in the past. But ultimately what it signifies to me is that in the digital world, it's every man / woman for themselves in terms of the companies, and every operator for themselves is probably the right way to put it. And ultimately, the strongest will survive.
The FanDuel DraftKings story, it's almost comical in that 10 years ago, they were the upstarts. The AGA was definitely against, what they were doing. If you can't beat them, join them. Or if you're beating us, join us, I guess, became the thing. Even up until like a year ago, even. I can't imagine that anyone would have seen DraftKings and FanDuel jumping in so quickly, I guess, or seeing that into the prediction market space. But here we are, and they're not the only ones. It seems like anyone that has a license and doesn't have a land-based operation is in this part of the industry. Is that like where you see like the battle lines being drawn?
I think it's very much this mode of, when you're a big company, you kind of get into this mode of analyzing different things that come your way. And you go through the process internally of debating, should you build it? Should you buy it? Should you try to undermine it in other ways? And then ultimately get back to, should you build it? And all the while, you haven't really been innovating the whole time. You've just been debating about what you should do. And then once you decide what you should do, you have to go do it. And then you have to roll it out. And so inevitably, I think what we've been seeing is these companies have gotten into this mode of doing what big corporations do, which is just go through the process of trying to decide what to do and figure out how to do it. And that takes time. And it takes cycles, and then it takes investment and ramp up and approvals and all that fun stuff. So ultimately, it's just, I think you're seeing the pace of innovation of some companies be greater than others. And that's, I think, what ultimately has happened. And maybe some legal interpretation at certain companies of certain categories and whether or not they would have staying power or be legitimate or whatnot, or be genuine threats, came to be one way instead of another, or however that discussion might have shook out. But ultimately, I think it's a lot of just pace of product development and then pace of regulatory development.
Looking at it from your perspective, obviously, if you look back at PASPA's overturning, nobody was predicting DraftKings and FanDuel were going to rise to be the dominant forces in OSB. A lot of the people, William Hill, MGM, those are the names that are being bandied about at the time. Heading into like what is looking like gold rush territory here for prediction markets, do you see DraftKings and FanDuel like being able to use the same playbook that they use with their deep roster of DFS contacts? Do you see Kalshi, PolyMarket as first movers being the more dominant force? I mean, I don't think we're going to wake up in a year or two or three and see 83 different prediction markets, like all with like a little slice of the pie. I'm sure there's going to be dominant players in it. Do you have a sense of who the dominant players are going to be?
I think you just named a lot of them. In that group, I think you'd find a lot of what should be the top players. The one I might flag is also Robinhood, which I think has structural advantages being a financial services offering and all the kind of verticalized offerings that they have associated with product like that and in an app like that. And ultimately, prediction market on its own, what we've learned is one of the key things that can drive gaming engagement is the ability to push and pull users between different products or cross-sell. And I think nobody has a better cross-sell advantage than Robinhood. And the stock price is looking very good, at least over the last, call it half a year compared to the gaming companies and really most companies, right? So that's a legitimate threat. I think Kalshi and PolyMarket have been off into the races in this world for a while, and they have first mover advantage, and first mover advantage can be an advantage. I think that's the big advantage. One of the big advantages that FanDuel and DraftKings had in the unlock of OSB across the country. And now it's certainly Kalshi and PolyMarket with that advantage. And so it'll be important for the FanDuels and DraftKings of the world to focus on doing what they're good at, which is creating great digital products for consumers across the country that they like to use when they're transacting on sports, and broaden that out to be able to focus more on other markets as well.
All the companies getting involved in it. I mean, again, like from your perspective, from what you do for a living, is this like companies just kind of like trying to cover their bets a little bit? I can't imagine that every single operator that's entering into this thinks that they're going to be the ones that like eventually, rise to the top here. So is it just like, we'll throw our cards in, we'll throw our chips on the table and see what happens? I mean, as like kind of a corollary to that question, it hasn't happened yet, but I have to imagine that we're going to see just like a massive influx, especially in states like California, Texas, Florida, of advertising. It's going to be a very expensive race to the bottom, much like online sports betting was, or am I wrong? I mean, how do you see that playing out?
I think the unit economics of sports betting and iGaming are different than prediction markets as they stand today. Customer acquisition costs that these prediction markets are willing to pay is generally lower than what you would see from a sports betting and iGaming company. And that's because the LTVs right now are generally lower. What they're going to pull from each customer is it's a different unit economic structure. That being said, it's still an interesting structure. And I think it's one of those stories that has a lot of momentum behind it, this narratives that have a lot of momentum behind it. And so all of the companies that we talked about need to be serious about prediction markets for their own different reasons. And I think if you are Robinhood versus Kalshi PolyMarket versus PrizePicks Underdog versus FanDuel, DraftKings, Fanatics, and whomever else, your strategies are going to be different. Your reasons for doing it will be different. And if you're a publicly traded company and your stock is getting hammered because of being late to prediction markets, on top of how DFS 2.0 played out, on top of how other things may be playing out in crypto, or maybe a Robinhood starting to come into this world a bit more, you've got to respond. And so I think what the stock market's been saying, look, the market's been down in the last few weeks pretty consistently in general, but if you look at the sports betting stocks, they're all underperforming the market at large. And I think just overall, they are probably feeling like they have to respond, and they're responding in their own ways. So leaving the AGA, focusing on launching prediction markets with partners, these are actions that they're taking that show where their priorities are.
Is there a reason, going back to something I said earlier, that it just, again, maybe I'm just oversimplifying it, that the land-based casino companies that are also in online, that they're staying away from prediction markets? Does that have to do with something in particular, you think, or is that just the way it's breaking down happens to be?
I think that prediction markets is very much like a direct to consumer product launch and like big tech direct to consumer product launch. And I think different types of companies are going to be better and worse than that at things like that. Also, different companies have different advantages and weaknesses to be able to exploit in a situation like that. And I think what you're seeing is the companies that feel like they can put a competitive product in market are doing so. And this is one of the ways that they want to broaden the tent of their overall addressable market. So if it's a hot new thing that can be played in a lot of states, especially states, big states where sports betting is not legal, it's going to be interesting to folks who are participating in legal sports betting and folks who are participating in financial services and crypto, and then folks that just think prediction as a standalone can work. And I think overall it can work. And we talked about the CAC and LTV differences between sports betting and iGaming. I think adding things like parlays, adding more cross-sell capabilities is going to make standalone prediction market companies get their margins up and get the sort of CACs and CACs they're able to pay and LTVs that they're taking in.
Do you see one of the things that, has kind of been bandied about a little bit with a little bit of a wink, nod, ha ha, is the idea of prediction markets turning towards what would appear to be otherwise casino type games, predict the next spin of a hypothetical roulette wheel, things along those lines. Do you see that happening as a, skirting the casino laws and stuff?
I think you're going to see a lot of companies test the boundaries of what is a prediction market. The same way we've really seen it when new other markets open up, everybody tries to kind of find their different angle and niche and lane. And I think that'll be the same in prediction markets. You'll probably see second movers and third movers try to find unique ways to get at the market until it either hits a wall or kind of dries up.
I'm fond of saying no one knows anything when it comes to where all this is headed. So with that being said, where do you think it's all headed? Does it survive the courts, specifically the sports side of it? Do you see it getting into the Supreme Court? Do you see deals being made? I mean, if you had to guess, what direction do you see it headed? Like, where do you think it's just it's here to stay? It'll thread the needle.
I don't know, honestly. I think both sides have interesting arguments, and I'm not sure if it'll rise to certain levels or get certain sort of exposure. I think what I would say is there's a lot of reason to, I think if you're a lot of these companies try to hedge your bets, and I think that's really what you're seeing here. So if you're certain interests and you're not sure if you want to participate because you want to keep your sports betting licensure, in all the states intact, but you see your stock price going down, right? You have to be able to manage both of those two things at the same time and ultimately make the decision that's in the best interest of shareholders. And ultimately that is likely pursuing the market and trying to win while also trying to figure out what the right pathway is to protect your licensure in all the states.
It's funny, I recently talked to Jason Robbins, and I thought I got a pretty frank answer from him, especially for someone who's a CEO of a publicly traded company. I asked him, I said, are you getting into prediction markets like to cover your ass or because you think it's the future? And he said, yeah, well, both, like, as you said, covering the bases. I feel like everyone's kind of covering the roulette wheel here, putting it on black and red at the same time, hope it doesn't land on green. I saw the other day, Kalshi's valuation, it seems to be up to about 11 billion. That was a tweet I saw. I don't have their numbers obviously in front of me. Then I saw DraftKings market cap is at 14 billion. All of a sudden, things seem to be moving a little bit. A lot of big money, a lot of high valuations, and then a lot of these, publicly traded companies getting hammered. It's been relatively quiet on at least, at large scale mergers and acquisitions recently. Do you see that picking up any steam in the coming months, years?
I mean, look, I think the PrizePicks majority buyout to Allwyn is a noteworthy deal. And I think if you go and look at sports betting stocks, I think the prediction markets get a lot of talk about their impact on the market cap of these gaming companies. But I think the PrizePicks deal has as much stake and claim to, potentially being a downward force on those shares as well, because looking at the charts, right? If you pulled up a stock market chart of Flutter, BetMG or MGM, Caesars, DraftKings, Penn, and superimpose all the different announcements that have been coming out across prediction and will include the PrizePicks all-win deal. That deal was announced on September 22nd. Go look at the stock charts of all those companies since September 22nd. It's not pretty, right? And I'm not here to say that that's the only driver, but I think the fact that there's another major digital sports gaming legalized player coming into the US that's a globally backed entity with its own kind of market advantages, and now what has clearly been one of the best direct to consumer marketing and product, kind of fit efforts of the recent years since PASPA repeal and PrizePicks. And you have a recipe as well to contribute to this pressure that we're seeing on the OSBs.
The all-in deal with PrizePicks, what do you see? How do you see that playing out stateside here?
I think that, listen, it's pending regulatory approval and closing conditions. And so it's not a done deal, but the parties are saying they expect it to be done in the first half of 2026. I think that there's a new big global gaming player in town, and one that will compete for share in sports mind share. I think if you look at the last, let's say year plus, I think it's been a lot of these publicly traded gaming stocks and their companies and executives talking about how they were on certain levels of share in terms of OSB market share or iGaming market share, but there's a wider picture of gaming consumption happening outside of those sandboxes. And in a very real way, I think the market is starting to pick up on that. And that is the impact of not only prediction markets and not only, sweepstakes and social and crypto gaming, but also DFS 2.0. And I think most significantly, probably prediction markets and DFS 2.0, and you're seeing a lot of pushback on sweepstakes now, and we'll see where all that nets out. But ultimately, all-win can compete with, in my view, pending the close and everything they're aspiring to do in the US market against some of these players with the force that is PrizePicks, because it's a category creator and the establishment through everything they had at them and, went through the whole build, buy, crush through other ways exercise. And they all ended up determining that they were going to roll out their own versions of the product multiple years late. And I would say that those products aren't as good as what PrizePicks has. And objectively, PrizePicks has probably been one of the better companies at reaching a big tent and building a real big tent brand in sports from the ground up that I can remember, maybe since FanDuel and DraftKings. And so it's a really impressive story. I think they've been doubted a lot, slighted a lot. Everybody's told them what they couldn't do, wouldn't do, shouldn't do. And, I think that they've done a lot of really great things in spite of what everybody said and thought.
Your company, or are you an investor with them, just to be clear?
Yeah, in full disclosure, I'm an investor in PrizePicks through my own venture fund, Kaplan Ventures, and then an SPV, which I led, of partners as well. It's myself. And then the fund I'm joining, Astralis, is Fund One, is also an investor in PrizePicks.
Gotcha. It's something that wasn't on the agenda that popped into my mind. I mean, you're obviously, at the bleeding edge of all this stuff as to what's coming down the pipe. Are there things in the gaming world that we just haven't seen yet that are percolating under the surface that, you're following?
I think that there's a lot of innovation and acceleration of that happening in a lot of areas, not just gaming, but also sports and obviously technology and media as well. And we'll be looking at all of those areas at Astralis going forward. And I think just generally, when it comes to gaming, there's a lot happening in each of these verticals that we've talked about, whether you talk about prediction market, DFS 2.0, or even in iGaming or sweepstakes or social or crypto. There's different innovations happening in each different bucket. And there's sure some different concepts coming out that are iterations of something that's already out there, just like finding a different lane. And then there are different versions of offerings that are likely to be categories, new categories if they can get created, or new ways of interpreting the existing legal landscape to try to exploit new opportunities. And so I think it's going to be more of the same, really, is what we've seen. If you go back to 2018, it was all about sports betting, and then sports betting and iGaming, and then DFS 2.0 and sweepstakes and prediction. And it's just going to keep going, honestly, unless there's some other sort of event that we all don't see that kind of brings everything to a heel. It's hard to see it going any other way.
Assuming things don't come to a heel, when you look down the road 5-10 years, do you envision the winners of this space being like, Target and Walmart type, like where you get your orange juice, your Christmas presents, and your golf clubs all in the same spot? Or do you see it more like, well, there'll be like 8 or 12 like different places that are doing, they do this really well here with the sports betting, but they do the prediction markets. This is where people think to go. Like, do you think, am I making sense?
Yeah, you are. I just don't really know the answer. I think if you're talking specifically about prediction markets, like and which way that might go, I tend to like the offerings that are on chain and that have the ability to interact with crypto and financial services alongside the ability to predict outcomes of events, because you're not just predicting outcomes of sports events. You're also in prediction markets. You can also predict the outcomes of real world events. And I think that appeals to a certain type of consumer. And I think that consumer is best, connected and informed in the financial services space. And that's where I think you could see a lot of potential disruption. And that's why I would say Robinhood's perspective on this could be very interesting to see, and it maybe goes under talked about. But you've got PrizePicks looking to be the doorway from like a sports fan perspective. You've got FanDuel partnering with CME and ultimately trying to broaden their horizons into real world events, and then DraftKings acquiring companies to go after the space. So there will be different strategies and approaches to how to go about this thing. And I would bet on consolidation, but I don't know if that's, going to make its way all the way up to the Walmart, Amazon level.
I guess you really need to be like, as I said earlier, kind of like on the bleeding edge of all this stuff. And the one thing about you that worries me personally a little bit is, I did a little half-assed internet research on you before we sat down here today. And a lot of the pictures I saw of you had a beard. It's been my experience, most people that grow the beard, keep the beard. You're going the other way. Is there something I need to know?
I have to go see my family for Thanksgiving in a few days. I can't look like a Grizzly Adams.
So that's it. It's the holiday shave.
My daughter likes me better with more of a shaved look too. So
I once shaved without telling my wife, and I was immediately instructed to stop doing that. So
it's a bit of push and pull in my house because my wife likes me better with a beard and my daughter likes me better without. So right. I just kind of go back and forth, and so try to keep them both happy.
How old is your daughter?
4.
All right. So yeah, you're going to have to keep, you got another 10 years before she couldn't give a shit whether you have a beard or not. All right, Adam, I think we did it here. Thank you so much for joining us today. So much is going to change, probably by the time this airs in a week, but it's just the pace of change in this industry it can make your head spin,
Yeah, indeed. I think it'll be more of that to come. And yeah, looking forward to being a part of it all. Thanks for your time, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Have a great day.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.